People who grew up with strict parents, what was their most unreasonable rule? My mom was very strict about the ratings of movies and video games. One year for Christmas a relative gave me a copy of Star Wars, Shadows of the Empire for the Nintendo 64. It was a T14 rated game and I wouldn't be turning 13 for another 4 weeks. My mom had my dad drive me to Toys R Us to return the game. We walked into the store and over to the games and he had me pick out an E for Everyone rated game. We proceeded to check out and as we went to the car he handed me not only the new game but the game we were supposed to have returned to buy it as well and told me not to let her catch me playing it. My mom used to be like that. No E10 games until 10, T games until 13 and originally no M games until 18. That changed when my cousins got me Super Smash Bros. Brawl for Christmas and I guess she just accepted it. I had a friend who wasn't allowed to say the word stupid, and tried to report me to the teacher when I said it. Teacher yelled at me and then told me it was okay in private and not to say it around that one kid. Nice guy, though, just had a helicopter mom. Edit, thanks for all the support. For anyone who thinks I'm shitting on the guy, let me remind you he was a very close friend. I eventually caught on to the concept of a helicopter mom thanks to this kid, so I just rolled with all the weird things his mom made him do. I also remember he would complain about the school lunch because it was too unhealthy. My kids are allowed to say stupid but we always taught them that it was never okay using it referring to a person. My oldest is 10 and when my youngest daughter heard her call something stupid she ran to tell on her older sister. My wife and I cracked up laughing when the little one couldn't understand why she hadn't gotten her sister in trouble. When I was in 5th grade I wrote some stuff in my diary about masturbating, and like a month later, my mom went through all my stuff. She would randomly go in my room, tear it apart, I'd always get in trouble for something, and then I'd have to clean up the mess and be grounded for whatever amount she felt like that day. So anyway, she found that diary entry. She picks me up from school and won't talk to me. I get home, my door was removed from my room. That diary entry was taped on the wall, and I was threatened with a belt if I didn't answer all her invasive questions. Fucked up. If I was the common Redditan in your situation I would assert my dominance and masturbate in full view during dinner. My mom used to randomly tear apart my room randomly too. I overslept one day and didn't make it to school on time. I was obviously on drugs. I got a C on a test. I was obviously on drugs. A friend called at 9 p.m. when my cutoff for the phone was 830. I was obviously on drugs. I had my bedroom door shut all night. I was obviously on drugs. I finally got sick of her accusing me of smoking pot for 3 years and decided to go ahead and try it. Oddly enough, she never accused me of being on drugs when I was actually baked. And in terms of sexuality, she gave me condoms when I was 12, bought me a vibrator when I was 15 and threw a barely legal magazine I had in my room into the fireplace and grounded me when I was 16. I don't even know. I don't get it. I am not allowed to do the following: use the washing machine, wash the dishes, pull the weeds, vacuum outside of my room. I must ask to use the vacuum. I can't cook a meal. I can't have the remote. I get instructed on how to use the microwave that I've been using for years and if I ask where we are going I get told out and I have to dress in jeans, a shirt and running shoes no matter how hot because he doesn't like shorts, and no jacket no matter how cold. We couldn't go sledding during the winter, or any other season, obviously, because my mom was a neat freak and didn't want snow slogged into the garage. So, no snow playing of any kind, really. Never built a snowman. Did go sledding when I was an adult. It's pretty great. All of our clothes in our closet had to be arranged by color, descending in order by shade. So, for example, midnight blue at one end of the blue section, and tar heel blue at the other. There was a system in place for colors, too, so if the yellows were by the purples, for example, there'd be hell to pay. No shoes on in the house under any circumstances. Was super uncomfortable when my brother's friend, who had prosthetic legs and always had shoes on, came over and didn't take his shoes off. Mom got really mad and confronted him. No Legos or puzzles allowed, as they make messes and look like disorder. I fucking love puzzles as an adult, one of my favorite hobbies. What happened to the friend with prosthetic legs? Did your mom get embarrassed or? My mom let it go the first time because he was only in the kitchen. Then, one day, she came home from work and we were downstairs playing College Slam on SNES and she asked him, not particularly nicely, if my 12-year-old self remembers correctly, why he thought he was so special that he didn't have to take his shoes off in our house when everyone else did. He responded by lifting up his jeans and showing his Jordans resting in a pair of fake legs and said, "I'm sorry, Mom. If I take them off, I'll have to take my legs off, too." My mom offered a half-hearted apology and went upstairs. She never commented on it again. Edit, thanks for the gold, stranger. I'm going to tell my mom about this next time we talk. It'll go really well. 30 minutes of internet time a day and 99% of the time, that was supervised, as in mom looking over my shoulder and commenting on conversations. We had web TV, RIP, and when they weren't home, they would literally lock the keyboard in a toolbox. My sis and I could never have friends stay over because the house is a mess. No amount of cleaning satisfied mom, because the real reason was she wanted to be able to fight with my dad at will. Oh god, same. Couldn't have friends over because the house is a mess, those exact same words. I wonder whose fault that was. Then when I tried to clean it was that doesn't go there, or stop moving my stuff. I had to write essays on TV shows that I wanted to watch, in order to have them unblocked by the parental controls. I remember writing a riveting piece on the educational and cultural benefit of Disney's That's So Raven. Also, I wasn't allowed to watch PG-13 movies, even after turning 13. Wasn't allowed to rest my head on my hand with my elbow on any table while there was also food on that table. If my parents found out I was going too fast in my car, small town, so other parents would snitch on me pretty regularly for going 10 over, I had to pay my parents speeding tickets. Also, they would make me pay for the whole family's phone bill if I texted a boy. By the time I moved out at 17, I had given them well over $1,000 in punishment money earned at the Sonic Drive-In. I was not allowed to talk to boys. One Christmas Eve day, I was doing last-minute shopping in the downtown of our little town. I ran into two male friends from my German class and we talked for several minutes and wished each other a Merry Christmas. Oh, I was 15 at the time. My older sister drove by and saw me, told my parents I was hanging out with boys. When I walked in the house both my parents were waiting and the yelling began. Some Christmas Eve. Parents who do the whole no boys thing are setting their daughters up to cling to the first guy to give them any attention, even if it's not positive or healthy. Kids need to experiment and find out what works, otherwise they wind up trapped by inexperience and in shitty relationships. I don't even know why they would do this in the first place. You want to have fun with other people. Not, there is no way in the world you will get married like your father and I did. Lol, I have parents like this. Wasn't allowed to talk to boys my entire life, until I was out on my own. Now my parents pester me about why I'm not married yet. If they're anything like my wife's parents, it's more about tradition and what the community thinks of you rather than what they actually felt. Looks like you do know why they are doing this in the first place. First-time parents are oftentimes scared and confused. Two emotions not necessarily known for supporting rational thinking in humans. A lot of parents fall back to my kid has to be like me or my kid should not have to experience the same things I did. Which is stupid because the first step in any train of thoughts should always be my child is a human. Side note, a very common form of psychological abuse stems from parents forcing their kid to enjoy and dislike the same things they do. Not ordering them to do things they dislike, like chores, but ordering them to have certain emotions. This is impossible. It will never happen. Gets worse when parents aren't compatible because kids may have two opposing opinions towards the same topic. In a similar vein, parents who constantly tease their kids when they interact with the opposite sex are just setting them up for being awkward around them for the rest of their lives. I speak from experience. Oh God, my parents were so strict about this. One time when I was hanging out with a good friend who is a male and he walked me home, my parents suddenly sat me down, warned me that I shouldn't have a BF yet, told me to be careful because I'll end up like my parents and other people who became parents at a young age. I was suddenly crying because I was scared and felt so bad for my parents. What's worst about this scenario is I was freaking 18 years old when this happened. And NBSP, they suddenly gave me the talk when I was fucking 18 years old, where I already knew what sex is and how can kids be brought in this world. And NBSP, but then I met my current BF when I was 19, he gave me attention and when I found out he had a crush on me, I just fell in love. When we became official I was so fucking clingy. Then my parents found out and we constantly fight because they think that my BF will get me pregnant. I was beyond pissed that they think so lowly like that about me and just rebelled the shit out of them. I am really lucky that my current BF is a champ and takes care of me so well. I worried constantly actually that if I hadn't met my I would end up in a very manipulative relationship. And NBSP, TL, DR, you are right. Parents who are so strict when it comes to boys will end up having daughters that gets all clingy to the first guy that gives them attention. In my case, I was immature and naive in my first ever relationship, but thankfully my BF is so patient and understanding. Lol, my BFF in grad school high school had parents like this, so I was basically a platonic beard professional third wheel and went on all her dates, then ditched them and met up hours later to pretend she'd been with me the whole time. But once at a football game two of her sisters, one of whom was younger but the other was probably like 23, had turned out to be spying on us from the bushes and snitched that their sister had been hanging out with mixed company, i.e. a group of people, chatting in a circle, but some of them were boys. How does an adult woman hide in the bushes to snitch on the equivalent of snack break small talk? Something very similar happened to me when I was 13 because I sat by a boy in church and my ultra-conservative grandparents saw and told my parents. My dad basically called me a whore. I decided that if he already believed that I was one, that I might as well be one. Within a month I lost my virginity. I became very promiscuous and still struggle with my self-esteem in relationships with men over 30 years later. Some parents have no idea how badly being too strict can backfire. I was from a large family and discipline was very strict. If myself or one of my siblings broke one of the major rules, my parents would hold a truth session. All the children would be brought to my dad's study where the guilty party would be given an opportunity to confess. If nobody came forward, we would be hit in turn in order of ascending age. The eldest four were hit with a sewer rod while, in deference to their age, the youngest ones would get a whack of a bamboo stick. A sewer rod is basically a 4-foot-long flexible rubber rod, around an inch thick and with a metal cap. It would leave the most remarkable welts. Horrendous things really. Anyway, this would continue until someone admitted their guilt. At that point they would receive the blows that everyone else had received to that point. So that was awful. I fully acknowledge that. I'm under no illusions. However, that wasn't the actual unreasonableness. No. The unreasonable part was that the person who caused the truth session didn't always receive the accrued punishment owed for having their siblings beaten. Sometimes they could just be let go, making their siblings hate them for causing pain to them. There'd be no explanation. The study door would be opened and we'd all be told to leave. That meant you could be rewarded for holding out and avoiding the punishment you'd definitely get if you admitted it at the beginning. My parents now tell fun stories about how when I was a child and I'd done something wrong, I'd always begin with, "Let me tell you my story." Haha, they sorta like my childish phrasing while I recall the terror that such an approach was meant to stave off. I thought my dad was the only one that made disgusting jokes about childhood abuse. His favorite is telling everyone how I used to threaten to call children on them. Like you. He ignores the context of 6-year-old me, backed into a corner, crying about calling Childline, after being slapped hard in the face because the dogs knocked something over, or because I didn't finish every bite of my adult-sized dinner. When a 6-year-old knows what Childline is, I think there is definitely a problem deserving of Childline. I wish I knew. My schools were so blind to the abuse and neglect, and it wasn't like it was hidden. No one called the state in not one but 2 states. I once pulled aside a teacher and told them I was being sexually abused. She told me that kind of thing is really hurtful to say about an adult man and you shouldn't make that up. No follow-up, no report, just walked away. I hate her to this day. Some teachers are great, I am sure, but this one took all my trust in adults and the system that was supposed to protect me. I have considered finding her now that I am an adult and telling her and her loved ones about all the abuse she could have prevented in vivid detail. Let her sit in retirement and think about it every day until it drowns her. Maybe send her reminders. But that is effort and I don't do effort. This sounds like your parents watched some Nazi prison camp movie and thought, hey, that sounds cool, let's try it on the kids. That actually sounds like how I grew up. But my brother and sister were 5 and 7 years older than me, so they would just straight up blame me for their shit. I could barely talk, so I got the brunt of the punishment, which was usually a leather belt with the buckle at the tip. Did you also get the 1/2 hour lecture that didn't end until you got your beating? The repetitive questions that you would answer 12 different ways, but it was never right, because he knew what was going through your head when you did whatever it was that you were accused of? Your parents were abusive psychopaths. There is no other explanation for behavior like that. My father was very strict. I wasn't allowed to have alone time with my mother. He beat the shit out of me constantly. But the honest thing that still bugs me to this day is that he would burn all my things as punishment. And I get it, seeing my toys and valuables burning sucked, and I probably learned some lessons. But he not only burned toys, he would burn everything. Every year or so for school we would go to Major and buy me new school clothes and shoes. He would also burn those, like sometimes days after he bought them. At 8 years old I remember thinking, you now have to buy me more clothes. But that wasn't the point, I suppose. He once took me to the Palace of Auburn Hills in Detroit to see the Globetrotters one year, and during the night he bought me a Globetrotters basketball and jersey. We had a fun night. The very next day, I had left something on the floor in my room, and his punishment, among other things, was to burn the basketball and jersey he bought for like $150 less than 24 hours earlier. It just never made sense to me. My friends would joke about it all throughout middle and high school. Seriously, one of the psychopathic answers on here. Sorry you had to live with that. This blew my mind. I was not allowed to wear makeup or shave until 16. My mom was controlling about food. Everything was kept track of. I had to be in marching band in order to get my permit. I had a job, but even if I worked second shift, which I did, and came home at 11, I would have to clear the plates from the table for the dinner that they ate. If I asked to hang out with a friend in the presence of said friend, the answer was automatically no. I was only allowed to do things if the friend or their parent was paying for it. The straw that broke the camel's back, and ultimately made me move out at 16, was that I had to live like a boarder. Showers cost $5, a load of laundry was $1 for washer, $1 for dryer. Telephone time cost $0.25 per minute. Showers cost $5, a load of laundry was $1 for washer, $1 for dryer. Telephone time cost $0.25 per minute. What the hell? What if for any reason you didn't have the money for a shower or clean clothes? Those numbers are so unrealistic too. Nothing costs that much in real life, lol. Your mom tried making a profit off of your existence, dude. No trends, or passing fads. Pokemon, banned. Barbies, banned. Beanie Babies, banned. PlayStation Gamma Boys, banned. Anything particularly fashionable, or popular regardless of actual merit was met with derision and we'd be mocked for even suggesting interest. We were achingly frumpy kids with interests in cultural references or lack thereof, that isolated us from our peers, and they wonder why each of us were bullied. Pretty sure the verdict is in on Barbie and PlayStation. They aren't fats. Since OP was young enough that PlayStation Gamma Boys were coming out when OP was young, the verdict was in on Barbie decades before OP was born. Hell, the verdict was all the way in for video games by the time PlayStation Game Boy came out as well. I read blogs by women who grew up in strict fundy households. I'm fascinated by the way so many of them value pop culture trends as a way to connect with other people. Made me realize how much a lot of us take that for granted. Once we were on holiday in Tunisia in the winter, road tripping, and my dad reroutes the drive plan around a sunken courtyard Bedouin house. We had mint tea, the people were nice, there were attempts to sing in Arabic and my dad is ecstatic. It wasn't until last year when I finally watched Star Wars, another fad, that I realized I had been to Luke Skywalker's home on Tatooine. This is the most tragic thing I have read in this whole thread. At least it is most tragic on a personal level to consider. So wait, as a fan of Star Wars, he took the family to Tunisia, but wouldn't let you watch Star Wars? As a huge fan, I can't imagine not wanting to share it with my kids. My stepmom's ex-husband decided Pokemon was evil and took all merch, of which the 3 kids had everything of since it was the late 90s, sheets, cards, clothes, blankets, toys, etc., and set them aflame. He was kinda batshit. My parents were slack, my best friend's parents were so strict. She would escape to my house for freedom. 12th grade, prom. Her parents allowed her to go to prom but said she wasn't allowed to dance. We all went to prom, had fun dancing, until she saw her parents standing at the back watching. She then moved out for university. After her first year, she came home to work for the summer. She had been on her own for a year and supporting herself, and her parents gave her a 9 p.m. curfew. She spent a lot of time at my house that summer. She was married by the next summer and didn't have to deal with it. Edit, this is a small selection of the intense upbringing my friend went through. Tiny even. How the hell are you gonna give an adult with a job a curfew, let alone a 9 p.m. curfew? They're insane. Sounds like a really good way to chase your kids into a marriage and into someone else's arms though. Even better way to make sure your kids quit speaking to you as soon as they don't depend on you to keep a roof over their heads. And of course, eventually all such parents wonder out loud why their kids don't contact them. This reminded me of something that baffled me. When my grandmother had a stroke 2 years ago, she spent a lot of time in the hospital. In the room next to hers, there was a miserable old woman who screamed obscenities at the nurses, her friend, daughter, everything. She had several kids who were still alive, but only the daughter came to talk to her. I caught my mom saying on a number of occasions that it was so sad that only the one daughter came to visit her and tried to claim that the other children were terrible for leaving their mother-in-law hospital and not visit. Like WTF. I'm pretty fucking sure there is a reason they never fucking bothered to come. This is the same woman who screamed that a nurse should die because she brought the wrong fucking jello for her supper by mistake. Sounds like your mom was seeing the situation from the perspective of the old woman instead of her kids. If I had to guess what logic was, the woman was miserable and screams obscenities at everyone because her ungrateful kids made her miserable. Huh? At one point, after the incident above, her daughter actually came over to my grandma's room and demanded my mom to stop having so much family over to see our grandmother, because they had to walk past the woman's room and it made the woman feel bad. Basically no one comes to see her, then no one is allowed us to see your mother. Lol, if I were your mom, I'd purposely invite as many people as I could to visit your grandma just to spite the daughter. Exactly. My mom wanted her to just come live with us so she had a shot of freedom. But we didn't have the room. When we younger she wasn't able to have sleepovers with the same person more than once every 3 months. So we had to start fabricating stories so she could stay with us. P.S. The money she made from any of the jobs she had from 15 on contributed to the house, even when she moved away. My parents did that. I'm a teacher. I graduated from grad school in May but didn't get my first paycheck until mid-August, so I moved home for the summer. They said I was disturbing the house when I came in later than 10 p.m. But that was on them. They're the ones with the paranoid alarm system setting that chimes every time a door opens or closes. They preferred giving a 22-year-old a curfew and keeping tabs on her coming and going over changing an alarm setting. I got a summer job at a pizza place and moved out within 2 weeks. My mom was insanely controlling about food. Weird rules were in place, like 1 slice of lunch meat per sandwich. No one but her was allowed to cook. She'd make 1 giant batch of spaghetti or something and we'd have leftovers for days, so she only had to make dinner twice a week. She did not work or anything, just didn't like cooking every day. Breakfast was cold cereal and you'd only be allowed a small bowl with just enough milk to moisten it. Occasionally she'd bake something she called corn toasties, which was simply cornbread baked in a sheet pan. She'd cut them into squares and fill the freezer with them, and we could have one of those for breakfast as an alternative. Once when I was 14 I bought a pack of hot dogs at the store, snuck them home, and lit the grill. I was almost done cooking them when she came out screaming about fire hazards and swatted the plate out of my hand. She had been making spaghetti. What an ungrateful little bastard I was. So then she orders a pizza for the rest of my family, wraps individual servings of spaghetti in freezer paper, and puts them away. She tells me that I will be eating nothing else until it's all gone. Took about 2 months to choke it all down. Went without eating a lot of days. I was also grounded for over a year. But I sure learned a lot about consequences. All because you wanted a hot dog. Some of these stories are more abuse than being strict. What the fuck? Yeah, these just aren't odd rules but straight up abuse. I thought it would be like my friend's mom decorative couch that you couldn't sit on. They're all abuse. When parents are reasonable about their expectations, they don't get called strict. 90% of this thread is psychological power plays. First thing I do when bringing people over: okay, here's the fridge, here's the snack cupboard, here's dishes and cups, bathrooms over here, here's my room. Help yourself to literally anything that doesn't have a name and a thread on it. It's been that way my whole life. My mother was neighborhood mom and everyone hung out at our house. Seriously, there's probably at least 25, 30 people who refer to my mom as Mom Auntie. Oh god, I wasn't allowed to go out, like ever. If I was gonna hang out with someone it had to be on the weekend, planned at least a week ahead, and my parents had to meet their parents and drive me there. They would come get me before the sun went down. Not a rule, but if I got up to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night or was reading because I couldn't sleep, my mom would come screaming up the stairs, "Why are you up?" and sometimes hit me. I wasn't allowed to close the door in my room. There's more, but that's what I can think of right now. Mostly my mother would just yell about everything. My parents actually removed the door from my room when I was like 16. I got it back when I started sleeping naked. Same, only I reinstalled the door and my dad blew it down like the big bad wolf because it was his door. So I took back his empty beer cans and used that money to buy a cheap door from the hardware store. He let me keep that one to show me the value of $1. I'm still not sure what to make of that one. I did kind of the same with my car. The car was usually the first thing to go when my parents were pissed. Then I managed to scrape together $1,000 from a summer job and buy my own shit a car, and they left alone since I paid for it myself. My parents didn't accept I paid for it as a reason, or it's my money if they didn't want me to buy something. My parents always said that it's in my house when I tried to use I paid for it as an excuse. The thing that sticks out most distinctly for me was my Xbox. They, of course, paid for the power, so therefore I wasn't allowed to use it if they didn't permit me to use the power. I tried to use this against them once when they forbade me from playing it, and I became upset that my dad was still playing it, so I took the power cable. They were displeased. This is Gloria's 2-picture. Kid, it's my Xbox. Parents, but it's my electricity. Dad continues to play. Kid, well then I guess that's my power cord. I had the exact same situation. I was surprised how fast being naked got my door back. Oh, and the fact that she would hit you when you couldn't sleep and had to pee makes me fucking furious. When parents have a rule that you can't even go to the bathroom after bedtime, that makes me wonder if they are doing something they don't want their kids to see. It makes me suspicious. For some people, it's the power trip. They have total control over someone and want to exercise that. Was forced to drop out of school in the 5th grade because my grandmother believed that most people have no souls and were demon-possessed. She said that the world was unsafe to roam freely because Satan was trying to corrupt God's children. This led to a very sheltered life and very silly things like having to pray over every individual item that entered the house. Food, toiletries, dish soap, you name it. I'd get woken up at 2 a.m. to be screamed at for 3+ hours over something God had told her that I did wrong. So yeah, I guess the most unreasonable rule I grew up with was not being allowed to leave the house. Edit. Okay, I get it. Apparently my life was binding up Isaac's storyline. This is mental illness that latched onto religion. Happens a lot. Sorry you had to live like that. It's a shame mental illness has such a stigma about it, but when undiagnosed and untreated it has such an impact on anyone close to it. Without hearing more, it sounds at the very least like a delusional disorder. Honestly, it could be as extreme as schizophrenia or a manic episode of bipolar type. I am not saying people with mental illness are inherently bad, but this story is a solid example of the cost on family and society. Edit. No blood weeping from their hands. I went through something similar. My mother took me out of school for 2 years, between 2006 to 2008. From 2004 to 2006 her mental issues had already been affecting my attendance before outright pulling me out. Actually, I don't think she even formally withdrew me rather than just stopped taking me to school. However, she didn't use religion as her justification of her mental instability. Instead it was a fake company that secretly ran the world with mind control by sending codes via electronics, not use TV, but light bulbs as well, and that were trying to steal her non-existent fortune. Not my parents, but my best friend's parents were insanely strict growing up. When we were preteens and sleepovers were all the rage, if we wanted to have one, we literally lived on the same street. It's a 2-minute walk between our parents' houses. We had to plan it at least a month in advance, if not more. Even then, for whatever reason, her parents would only agree to them rarely, so really we'd only get to have like 2-3 a year. One time I started getting sick at school on a Friday and we had planned a sleepover, ages ago as usual. For that night, I was feeling absolutely awful but tried my best to stay at school because obviously if I went home sick the sleepover would be called off. Made it to lunch and then the teacher called me over and said I was white as a ghost and burning up and had to go home. My best friend and I were devastated. Sad day. In the 1970s, my extremely conservative Mormon mother would take the masks from out grocery store plastic Halloween costumes, those wretched ones with the thin elastic string to hold them on, and widen the eye holes with scissors as much as she could without destroying the mask. When we asked why this was necessary, she informed us that in our church, we don't like masks because it was a group of masked men who murdered Brother Joseph Smith. So we want to be able to see your face clearly enough even with your Halloween masks on. Totally pointless and ineffectual dogmatism, except that whatever that is was never any kind of LDS dogma. There's a rule about masks in the church building, so costumes shouldn't have masks. But I just assumed it was a safety thing. We need to know who you are type thing. So maybe your mom added her own reasoning behind it without actually knowing what was up. I was interested in learning about Wicca, because I was young and in high school, early 2000s, when Harry Potter was still happening and all that stuff. My mom and stepdad found out by reading an email I sent to my cousin. It was the summer and they freaked out. Truck, everything. I couldn't read, I couldn't listen to music, I couldn't watch TV or movies with the family, I couldn't hang out with friends, couldn't talk to my cousin anymore. Basically anything that might bring me pleasure was taken. They made me do chores all day, would go on family outings without me. Soon I became a shell of a person. I was going to kill myself. I wanted to, I just was scared of death, so I decided not to go through with it. So I turned myself off. They hated it. They weren't getting a rise out of me anymore. Anything they said to me, to extending my sentence, I wouldn't react to. Since their narcissism relied on a victim, I wasn't a source anymore. So they extended my grounding even further. They could have told me to go pick up dog shit in the backyard with my teeth and I wouldn't have flinched. My stepdad's family, just as terrible, would come over and belittle me as well. I was told to smile. So I'd humor then and flash an empty smile for a second and return to my blank expression. I had to find solace in all this to save me from going to hell. The only thing that saved me that summer was my visitation with my dad. My mom and stepdad tried to paint him in a bad light, like HR was the abusive one. Even as a kid I knew my dad didn't make me feel as bad and empty as they did. I eventually got through it. Years later, about 4 years ago now, I ended up working at a job, unexpectedly, with a girl I used to play with in the neighborhood. I always wondered why she stopped showing up. When I wasn't home, or in another part of the house, she came to the door and asked to play. One of my parents opened the door and told her I didn't want to play with her anymore. I always wondered why she never hung out with me, or talked to me. Even finding this out in a more recent term, I cried and apologized to her. I could have had a great friendship with a lot of people, but they just wanted to alienate and control me. Unfortunately, this is just the tip of the iceberg. I don't talk to them anymore, but I still live in the same city as them and I have a lot of social anxiety because of that. One of my roommates exhibits some of the behavior my parents were so kind as to bestow on me. It's making things difficult to handle. I just want people to be happy and live in a healthy environment. It's so fucked up that the biggest monsters in the world are the people closest to you. Edit. Thank you, kind stranger, for the gold. One of my parents opened the door and told her I didn't want to play with her anymore. That's horrendous. I have too many to name. Growing up in an Asian household, but the one that was the most embarrassing was I was not allowed to shave my legs or armpits, and I hit puberty at an early age. So I had really hairy armpits and legs and was forced to wear shorts to gym class. I was so embarrassed about my legs that I would wear shorts with opaque pantyhose, which just made the whole situation worse and was the butt of many jokes in middle school. My mom has apologized thousands of times since, but it still brings back crappy memories. Freshman year of high school, I had one of those wispy mustaches that all teenage boys have. My mother refused to let me shave. I got called everything from pedo stash to dirty Sanchez. 15 years later, the joke's on her. I have a long-ass Viking beard and she constantly bitches at me to shave. Sorry mom, can't. Not allowed. LMAO, my parents were the same, so I used to do it with the scissors until they relented. My giant rite of passage into shaving was my dad just saying, soap up your face, run the razor across until there's no hair left. What if I cut myself? I was afraid I would accidentally slit my throat. You can't. They're safety razors. You'd have to try and hurt yourself with them. I cut my cheek open. He rolled his eyes at me. Good times. I thought I was the only one who missed this whole shaving is a rite of passage shit. I was invited to my first post-puberty pool party. My older sister literally just told me your legs are hairy. There's a razor in the shower. And I fended for myself. I relate so much. My mom didn't allow me to shave until I was a freshman in high school. Gym was so embarrassing. This is legitimately so confusing to me. I already get frustrated when parents don't let their kids wear makeup, but at least I can understand it. What is the logic behind not letting kids shave? I don't even understand why they won't let their kids wear makeup. I think the bright blue eyeshadow smudged on face is an embarrassing, integral part of everyone's childhood experience. Same for me, I was allowed to shave when I turned 16. But before it was so humiliating in gym class, everyone laughed at my armpit hair. My dad was incredibly strict while I was growing up. Two of his stupidest rules were, 1. My brother and I had a bedtime of 9 p.m. until I was a senior in high school. 2. Bedtime was so strict that we weren't allowed to get up and use the bathroom after 9 p.m. And 3. He made us have a babysitter until I was 14 years old. Of course, he denies ever doing any of these things to this day. Edit. Another very stupid rule was no locked doors in the house, ever. As in, locking the bathroom door wasn't allowed, and my dad proclaimed that he should be allowed to come into any room in his house at any time he wanted. He would often try to come into my brother and my rooms while we were changing or something, so I got into the habit of changing my clothes very quickly and only when our dad was upstairs or something. He tried to come in your room while you were changing? That's a little pedo-ish. Oh, absolutely. My dad was I assume, haven't spoken to him in years, the textbook definition of a narcissist. He had to prove that we were constantly under his control because he paid for the house. I have a ton. One was that I had to always give 24 hours notice if I wasn't going to be home for dinner any night of the week. Because dinner plans are never made the day of. This lasted until I moved out when I was 19. I thought that would get better, but it actually became worse. My sister and I go to dinner to our parents every Sunday, and now they need 72 hours notice if we're not going to be there. Also had 10 p.m. curfew every day of the week until I moved out. Sleeping in was never a thing. 9 a.m. wake up call otherwise. Parents had sensors on our doors so they could tell if we left our rooms in the night. Cameras covering every inch of outside. We weren't allowed to use the bathrooms after midnight. My stepmother came storming out of her room one night when I went to the bathroom at 2:30 am because, sometimes you wake up and need to go, and I was sick of peeing in a bottle because of their rule. She stormed out and confronted me and looked like she was about to hit me. I said I fucking dare you as I was ready to hit her back. So many. Edit. Spelling. Edit 2. At one point, they cut off power to our rooms at 10 p.m. every single night. This lasted less than a month, but still happened. What happens if you or your sister don't give the 72-hour warning of not showing up? 1. Don't talk to boys. In high school, I rebelled and did talk to boys. I had my guy friends drop me off a block away every time. It was an innocent friendship. 2. No skirts and shorts above knee length, including gym shorts. 3. No shoulder skin to be revealed. All shirts and tops needed to be accommodated by cardigans. Just to clarify, this was mainly about tank tops, sleeveless tops. 4. No kitten heels, also known as hooker shoes, to my parents. 5. Go to church 4, 5 times a week. 6. No tattoos and no earrings. Edit. Spelling error and added some clarification. Edit. Again. I should really read what I wrote. Go to church 4-5 times a week. 1. Wake up early. 2. Drive to church. 3. Walk in. 4. Walk out. 5. Repeat 3 times. 6. Profit. My wife's parents are still strict, and it's annoying whenever we visit. You're not allowed to sleep in even if you're off work, and you can't lounge around in your PJs and have to be fully dressed in the morning, again, even if you don't work. Shit doesn't make sense. Edit. The majority of people replying have been asking why we put up with it. Well, we barely stay over. It's usually just holidays, so it's not like it's all the time. It was more prevalent when my wife still lived there when we first met. We just go along with it to stay on their good side as they help us out when we need it. You're a grown-ass man and someone else's parents think they can wake you up on the morning. Fuck that. I had to spend a year with my parents after I had lost everything and was put on probation. Man, I immediately got a job, but it was night shift, and every morning I would get woken up being yelled at to get out of bed and stop being lazy, even though I would get home when the sun was rising. One of my fucking boyfriends used to do this to me. He called me lazy cause I'd sleep till noon. Hello. I didn't get home till 4 a.m. you jackass. I could never get the attitude of shit-talking your BFGF like that. Like, why are you with them if you think so lowly of them? Right? I didn't stay long after that. He was of course perfect at first, but his true colors came out after a few months. I honestly think he was just stupid. He couldn't grasp how him sleeping from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. was exactly the same as me sleeping from 5 a.m. to 1 p.m. He kept telling me that no one sleeps past noon. A lot of people just don't understand what it's like working night shift. They literally can't grasp the notion that you go to bed late, so you have to sleep late. They think you should be able to do things with people around the normal times that everyone else is doing things. Less extreme, I lost my job about 2 years ago. My dad called me at 7:30 a.m. the next day to berate me for being a lazy fuck for still being at home and not out looking for a job at 6 a.m. The second day, he did it again. The day after that, he did it again, but I turned all my phone notifications off until 8. I'm not 19 years old living at home or something. I own my own home, I've got credit cards and car payments, and other people that depend on me. I've my own reasons for needing to find a new job. None of them involve impressing my father. Needless to say, my dad is a bit abusive, even after being out of the house and on my own for a few decades. God, my mom used to be like this when I was growing up. She judges me now for wearing pajamas all day on my day off, or not wearing makeup on my day off. I literally don't understand why one would put on nice clothes and make up to stay home and do chores. I never would be in my PJs at home. Lazy clothes, yes. My ex wouldn't allow PJs outside of sleep time. Dude would lounge in jeans. My so and his mom both subscribe to changing into PJs as soon as they get home. It has rubbed off on me and I wouldn't have it any other way. My so and his mom both subscribe to changing into PJs as soon as they get home. My daughter and I subscribe to this. It was a matter of honor who got into their PJs first. Edit, even when she had her own home we would text each other PJs on. One thing I have to deal with right now is my parents saying they own everything I own even if I bought it with my own money. I bought an Xbox One when it first came out and they were like, you have to share it with your brother, so I said okay, whatever. Now that I want to sell my Xbox they are like, you can't because he still uses it and it's ours because we found the job that you're getting paid at. This isn't the only time this has happened. Even if I'm wrong, I'm right. This caused a lot of confusion on my part and rage on theirs. I got my head knocked through a cabinet door for eating a grape wrong, and even more trouble when I cried. Edit, thanks dude, for the gold. I cheesed too dang hard. In short, yes, I still see my parents regularly. I'm at their house with my daughter. Yes, I've always known they were kinda fucked off in the brain. I've learned to take no shit. Oh, my husband has been there since we were 16, and I attribute my take no shitness to him. Wait, there must be more. The story of your head being knocked through a cabinet because you ate grapes wrong. How did you manage to eat grapes so wrong to get such a harsh punishment? Unfortunately there's not. I was standing in the kitchen with my sister and her friend. Dad came in and saw me peeling the skin off of my grape. Immediately upon seeing his face, I knew what was coming. He screamed at me to eat my food right. I guess he meant to slap me, but I turned into the hit and he caught my forehead, sending my head through the cabinet. I didn't eat grapes for a very long time. Geez, pushing someone's head through a cabinet is action movie stuff. In domestic life that's something I would call the cops over. My grandfather would smack my dad across the face hard as a kid if my dad mispronounced words, which he had a speech impediment. Dad now thinks it was hilarious and tells the story proudly. He used similar methods with us. Looking back on it, I still am not amused. I had a friend who wasn't allowed to sit on the couch, no matter the circumstances. That was the first time I realized something was really wrong in his house. The kicker, it was a crappy couch, so it's not like he was going to ruin it. Edit, responding to a gazillion people at once. To the folks looking for logic, you'll find none. No, the parents weren't saving the couch for company. No, the kids didn't have a history of damaging the couch. No, the kids weren't little troublemakers. They were surprisingly well-behaved teens, surprising because of how they were raised. This is about control, not logic. Domestic abuse is always about exerting control. Don't let anyone try to convince you otherwise. Even after adding a note about child abuse, I'm still getting jokes about how my friend must be a dog. Thanks, Reddit. My grandfather did that. All my siblings had to sit on the wood floor. I think he had the same couch for 30+ years. He also didn't allow us to take showers or baths because they wasted water, so we would crouch miserably in an empty tub and scoop handfuls of water over ourselves to clean, even in the middle of winter. As a child who took half-an-hour-long showers every single day, I am surprised this didn't happen to me. Did he grow up during the Depression? I had great-grandparents that did, and they had rules like this, especially with food. I was the last of 7 kids to older parents, who had to survive during the Depression. 10 cents meant not losing the farm to taxes, or having food for 10 days. They assisted, or made us kids, earn a $1,000 before we left high school. After high school, you left home. I put away $960, and my father wouldn't give me the last $40, and made fun of me that I couldn't reach the family goal. I got to go away to college with a partial scholarship due to academics, had 1 bag of possessions, and I wrote a check for my tuition, which was just about that exact amount. I've got to say, the pride of paying my own way meant nothing. I never got to finger or spend a single dime on anything I earned, and it affected me for a long time. I gave my money to someone else. I was so deprived of money as a kid, my mother was hesitant about giving me 5 cents for ice cream. The last time I asked was in the 3rd grade. When I was in the 8th grade, she asked about me not asking for money for ice cream in a while. Both my parents were just traumatized by the Great Depression. They never overcame their fear of not having money, or having any freedom to spend it. As far as I know, we children provided for everything my parents needed after we got jobs, so they kept all the money they earned. When my last parent passed away, the estate included $250,000 in cash, and full ownership of a 100-acre farm. After getting about a 7th share, I upgraded to a better house, less debt, but it felt like nothing. There's no reason to deprive your children, or yourself. Nourishment to the body is more than just fluids or food. I have survived and then some. The sum just came way later than it needed to. It lingers in mind as I move into retirement. I can recall the single moment my young daughter felt like she needed more money to be with her friends. I never felt more ashamed, and that never happened again. Same thing for my house. I didn't get to sit on the couch until I was an adult and moved out. Sat on my own damn couch. I had to shower and have unclean clothes to sit on any furniture other than a wooden chair. Just came in from outside. Sit in a chair or on the floor. Home from school. Chair or floor. It was an old-ass ugly couch. I also wasn't allowed to bring a blanket out of my room to use on the couch. And you had to sit on the couch. No laying, just sitting. It took me a few years on my own to realize I wanted a couch and not an empty living room after I realized I could snuggle on my own couch if I wanted. Man, that's so depressing. I'm glad you eventually figured out that you could buy a couch and enjoy it. I hope you bought a big-ass fluffy one and laid all over it with a mental middle finger pointed at the memory of your parents. Well, I pretty much couldn't do anything at all. I wasn't even allowed to put posters on my wall. I'm not sure whether it was to protect the wall or some other silly reason. All I wanted to put up was a cute poster of a cuddly seal, so I ended up sticking it behind my door. My dad once told me that he was going to ground me due to my poor performance in school, so I simply responded with, "Go ahead, ground me. It's not like I go anywhere anyway." His dead silence after that was an acknowledgement that he knew I had a point there. My radio was taken away during exams, because I had to concentrate. The radio helped me concentrate. That's the last straw. No cuddly seal posters. Fuck this. Leaves the house. Lots, but the most annoying one was 1 hour of electronics a day. My parents always used to take away the cords to the machine when they would leave the house, and so one time my dad went to rip out the cords like usual, but he ended up taking the Wii cords instead of the PlayStation. I was in awe that he couldn't make the distinction between the device that was black, lit up, and making noise and the idle white machine. No lying. Seems reasonable, maybe, but it's not. This is going to get buried, but it's important, so I'm going to post anyways. It wasn't about the rules. It was about the constant interrogations. There weren't so much rules, as there was her personality and the things that bugged her, and the fact she was going to interrogate the absolute shit out of us every single day. It's the complete lack of privacy and the total suspicion that makes living with this kind of parent the worst. Not even the widest of lies, or the tiniest of omissions were acceptable. Where were you? Why? When did you get there? When did you leave? Who else was there? What did you do? Why did you do this? And did so and so do that? Why did you let them? And how is that related to this other thing? Why did you just lie to me? It's hard to explain, maybe, but there was this Socratic lawyer-type method being applied constantly to invent lies to catch you in. Like she was looking for an excuse to backhand you, digging in until our memories failed to provide total consistency, and then she could ground us, or whatever. If she was in a bad mood, she'd scowl around the house until she found something out of place so she could scream at us. Screaming. Lots of screaming. For strict parents, it's often not really about the rules. It's about respect, which is a dog whistle for total domination of the subordinates in the household. If there were rules, there would be times when I was allowed to do what I was doing without suspicion. This did not exist. Every single day on my way home from anywhere, I had to prepare a huge list of answers, try to find where she would dig in and build up the walls. Keep stories simple. Build big emotional walls. It mostly didn't work. We didn't really have a relationship. We didn't talk about my feelings. Maybe try imagining if every day you had to cross the border twice and board a flight, but the border agents are all your mom. IDK, where to start? My mom was super chill. Whatever I was going to do was fine. When I went to my dad's place, totally different story. I am not diagnosed, but I'm pretty sure I am on the dyslexia spectrum somewhere. I'm 34 and still say right when I mean left. I am also a professional electrical engineer and still don't have the multiplication tables memorized, pretty much proof, if you ask me. Anyway, in grade school I was struggling with the tables in math class and my dad sat down and wrote out a bunch of multiplication problems in a notebook and had me sit at the table and work them out. When I started struggling, he became visibly and audibly agitated, which my brother and I knew was basically a death sentence. Anyway, after shouting "what is 7 times 8" at me a handful of times, he backhanded my face so hard that it spiked off the table, leaving imprints of Harley-Davidson rings on my right face and spiral notebook lines on my left. For scale, I had personally witnessed my beast of a father bench press 400 pounds. Another time was that he asked me to lay a shirt over a chair to avoid it wrinkling. He closed fist blasted me in the back of the skull for doing it wrong. I could go on and on. The rule was that you must always perform to his standard, which was impossibly high for a 9-year-old and unstated before you begin a task. Shortly after my 10th birthday he got pissed about custody and kicked my mom's door in and shot her twice before killing himself. He didn't care that I was watching or what would happen to me after he orphaned me. Reading through these posts, a lot of these are clear-cut cases of child abuse. For those people, you should know that your parents are fucked up. Don't blame yourself for the bullshit they pull, Ed. I hope that you are all living the lives you want now and doing what you want, when you want. For those still under their parents' thumb, just write it out. It will get better. Was only allowed 45 minutes of computer time daily. If anything happened to the computer, it was the video game's fault, not the shady links my mom still clicks on 14 years later. Edit, I'm getting a lot of cool responses, but I can understand where my parents were coming from. I'm originally from Poland, which as a lot of people know was a communist country for a while. Everything was heavily regulated for quite some time. Even after '91, the practices were still common up until 2003, at least in the area I'm from, so I got a chance to experience mild communism, though I was a bit young to grasp politics. Coming to the US, they felt they had to regulate everything in the household, just because that's how it was since they were born. Since then, they've really cut back in for the most part. They're pretty relaxed about everything. But I feel like I got the short end of the stick. Growing up, I wasn't allowed to hang out outside of school, even during high school, and in high school I wasn't allowed to date, so my social experience was pretty pathetic to say the least. After graduating, my parents saw no real threat from letting people hang out or date, so my brother got a smooth ride through high school. It's better now, although I still have issues meeting new people. I've kept a small circle of 2-3 friends that I talk to, but hopefully that changes next year if I move into NYC for school. At least I still have RuneScape. D. My dad was the same way. Any computer issues are either blamed on downloading music or video games. 90% of the times it was the porn sites he visited. Agreed. Did you ever make the accusation? P.S. Your name is backwards. No dragons, no fairies, no trolls, no witches or magic. No holidays, no eating the holiday candies and cupcakes at school or even in those packages. No saying the Pledge of Allegiance. No dating until 18, which was meant for marriage and had to be with a chaperone. No worldly friends over. No loving my grandma too much because she wasn't going to paradise with us. I could go on. TLDR, my mom was a strict Jehovah's Witness who followed all the rules to a T. My mother is a hardcore narcissist. There was a ton of stuff. I had to literally whisper responses to her when we were talking because my regular indoors voice is an attitude that got me in trouble. I wasn't allowed to do chores. I literally begged to let me do the laundry or cook as a child because I knew I'd be hurt later in life if I didn't. I'm 20 and I still have yet to be allowed to do anything other than take out a garbage bag. I got in a lot of trouble a few months ago for making scrambled eggs. I wasn't allowed to work during school. Even now that I'm older, she would actively try to sabotage me by applying for the same exact position so that I wouldn't get the job. I still am not allowed to drive. I have my learners only because I had to get it for school. They expire in 2 months. I've been behind the wheel of a car once in my life. Growing up, I was never allowed to go to anyone's house. Unless they came over to my house, I would never see anyone outside of school. Sleepovers weren't allowed. I went to a single birthday party in school, and I recently came to the realization that I was probably invited to more as a child that my mother never told me about. I'm not allowed to show any emotion. If I show visible signs of frustration, I get in trouble for having an attitude. If I am happy, I get yelled at that it doesn't matter. If I'm sad, I get told to get over it because men aren't sad. I was allowed to date, however, only people of my race. If someone's grandparents were of a different race or anything, I wasn't allowed to even really interact with them. I wasn't allowed to go outside as a kid. As in literally, other than to go to school, I never went outside to play. I have no memories of ever doing anything active as a child. I bought video games and a TV for my room at a young age solely so that I wouldn't try to go outside and play. Honestly, there's probably a lot more. These are just the first things to actually pop to mind. Not a rule as such, but my dad could be grumpy and give ridiculous, unreasonable commands. Best example, he was in the kitchen and I walked through with a half-empty glass of water that I didn't want anymore. I emptied the water in the sink, put the glass in the dishwasher and started to walk away when my dad yelled at me, "Wash that drink away." I told him it was water and he said, "I don't care. I told you to wash it away." I did it and mumbled, "Okay, I'll just wash the water away with water then," and got a smack for giving cheek. Oh, and in the 80s when bum bags, fanny packs, were in fashion, he wouldn't let me say bum as he thought it was rude. I had to say bottom bags. So cringy. A friend of mine once told me that her cousin's parents were so strict that they couldn't say the word fart or even toot. They either had to call it a fluff, a foof, or a pooper popper. I didn't understand how any of those weren't more cringy than fart or toot. And they couldn't say booger. They had to call it a boogie or snot. Fucking weird, haha. My dad would play Texas Hold'em online whenever he wasn't working and my mother was. In order to properly keep an eye on my brothers and I, he would order us to sit quietly behind him. No taking. No games. Just sit in silence 4 hours on, and while he screamed at the monitor whenever he got a shit hand, so not really a strict rule but more of an absurd situation that happened way too often for my own liking. 1. They're never wrong. 2. I'm regularly left in charge of my sister 4 hours at a time. She isn't allowed to see me as an authority figure, despite the fact that she is in kindergarten and I'm a HS junior. 3. When I'm out, I have to text or call them every 30 minutes to an hour. 4. I'm not allowed to be alone with any male, excluding my father. 5. I am not allowed to discuss my medication, antidepressants, with anyone because it makes my parents look bad. 6. I'm not allowed to go to church because my parents say our local churches are corrupt and will turn me into some kind of cultist. 7. I don't have a curfew. I'm not allowed to go out unless it's with them or my two best friends, who usually have their parents with us. I must be home exactly when they tell me to, and that changes sporadically. I am not allowed to discuss my medication, antidepressants, with anyone because it makes my parents look bad. It's exactly this shit that actually makes them bad. I'm sorry you have to deal with that. Having a mental health concern is rough enough without other people attaching a stigma to it. I changed my mind. I guess my parents weren't so bad. Edit. Wow, went for a hike today out of cell service and returned to 9k karma and 30 plus comments. Since a couple people asked what I was going to say, it sounds pretty lame now compared to the rest of this thread, but I'll explain a few. We weren't allowed to swim in rivers. We were rarely allowed to go to friends' houses unless the parents knew each other. We weren't allowed to go anywhere on our own until we could drive, which was 18 for me, and just the usual strict parent pushing to get all A's. Finally, something I can contribute to. Reads through comments. I think I need to call my mom. Yep. Came here thinking I had something that I could potentially post, but most of the stuff here is just downright abusive. Some of the stuff here is the pretty WTF. Equals. I think the quantity of those posts is what's bothering me really. I can deal with reading one or two bad accounts, but, equals. My parents are amazing. I never realize until I venture into threads like these. I thought my family was pretty nuts going up, but you never realize until you make your way into the world. Some true nutters out there. Long list. Dad is a Baptist preacher. A few of the ones I hated most, could only listen to gospel music. No country, rap, pop, etc. No Harry Potter. Witchcraft is of the devil. No staying at friends' houses on Saturdays. Church was on Sunday. No long hair or spiky hair. No spring break trips. Even after I moved out, I had to endure advice and lectures about how going on these trips hurt my testimony. We weren't even drinking, just wanted to go to the beach. Growing up, my neighbor's parents were like this. She also was only allowed to wear long skirts, no jeans or pants ever, even when riding horses. Wasn't allowed to go anywhere and friends always had to go to her house. Homeschooled from a Christian website, so her only friend was me really. Well, one day she asked me to load country music onto a MP3 she got. Somehow, I was respectful of her parents' rules and got her country songs that were all worship or good still, and she got in a lot of trouble. They blamed me for corrupting her, and I hate country music. That was all her. I grew up listening to Pantera and Act, but never shared my music with her because I respected their religious rules. She moved out the second she got a car. Seems like pants would cover more than a long skirt while riding horses. My life with my parents is unreasonable. I am 22, have to live with them, go to college, and I can't move out because of my diabetes supplies costing too much. If I get a job while living with them, I get thrown off their insurance plan. I am not allowed to go over and see my friends, invite people over, drive a car, go outside without them except to go to class, and they GPS track me, still have a curfew, and they take my stuff away if I don't answer the phone or call them back within 5 minutes if I missed a call. Basically not even allowed to take a nap or a crap without their knowing. That's ridiculous that they are using your condition to control you. I'm sorry, bro. I had an insane stepmom who was very controlling and vindictive, really weird rules, so when I moved in with them in middle school, I had a 10 p.m. bedtime. If I woke up at 2 or 3 in the morning and went to the bathroom, she'd run into the room because I broke her rule and start screaming at me and hitting me. Then, she'd go and take my CD player and books from my room, so I had to stay in there with nothing, not allowed to leave my bed when I would be at home for a week after the incident, or she'd beat me up. I was 11. I ended up taking the screen out of my window and just pissing out the window at night. Stopped eating before bed so I would need to go number 2. If I disagreed with her or asked a question, she would always make me recite, "A wife comes first, in a marriage you are second." She was also crazy about the bus and me taking that to school. There was a bear one time, literally maybe 80, 100 yards from the end of our driveway, so I told her, drive me to school, I'm not standing out there for the bus. Basically got punched in the mouth and told to go stand out there and not worry about the bear. I didn't, and that was a huge fight. Note that shit stopped real quick when I turned 14. I went from 80 pounds to about 145 pounds, and started wrestling. She hit me in the face with wooden rod hard for using the bathroom in the middle of the night, blindsided me as I was walking out. I hip-tossed her hard across the room and mushed her face and stepped hard on her chest, pinning her down, and told her very firmly, "You're not strict." Her term, "You are controlling and a bully who has nothing going on in her life, stay at home and do nothing but TV all day." Never fucking touch me again. The funny thing is, after that, for like 3 or 4 years, she became really cool. Not allowed a key until I was 18, or was it 16? Can't remember, yet nobody would be home once I got back from school, so I would spend a lot of time hanging around outside. I would usually be expected to be waiting outside, though sometimes it was forgotten this was a rule, so I would go to the local library. Even once I was given a key, I wasn't allowed to stay home alone and had to vacate if they were. Once, I lost my key. Turns out my cousin had it in his pocket, but he forgot. My stepdad said we would have to change the locks as someone might find them and rob the house, and when my mom got home, she demanded I go and look for the keys again. I refused as I'd spent hours looking and knew I wouldn't be able to find them. She then demanded my phone, so I refused and sat on it. So then she gave me a long, hard look, picked up a box of trinkets on my bookcase and turned it over while staring at me. After I didn't react, she trashed more stuff in my room until I started to scream and shout at her, swearing. I didn't usually swear at her, but the years of abuse meant I would burst into anger when she started on me, asking her what was wrong with her. While I screamed at her, she stopped and laughed at me incredulously, asking me in a calm voice what was wrong with me. Then she said in a low, threatening voice, "Find your fucking keys," and left. So yeah, not the only ridiculous rule they had, but one that sticks out the most. Also, my bag was searched every morning before school, and I wasn't allowed to wear short puffer jackets or jackets without arms. Edit. OMG, I think this is my highest rated comment. Thanks guys. Not allowed a key until I was 18, or was it 16? Can't remember, yet nobody would be home once I got back from school, so I would spend a lot of time hanging around outside. I would usually be expected to be waiting outside. This was me until I threw a big fit and kicked our back door down. Did it again the next day. Got a key at the end of that week. I'm a 30-year-old now, raised old school Christian from SoCal, mixed in some crazy ex-Marine and Navy upbringing. I was the eldest, and my father was not by blood, but younger brother was their love child, 7 years younger, golden child who could do no wrong, even after losing a full LAX scholarship to a college for selling weed, was never discussed or reprimanded. Just do not mention it. Kind of the same family rule about my stepdad stays in jails and years of drug use. I essentially was treated like a troublemaking teen out of their own fear past experiences, I suppose. Rules: no bedroom door allowed, forced eating plan, because I was chunky even though heavily active in soccer and dance. Color guard courtship through church to begin soon. Chaperone approved dating, no diaries or notes. Read aloud at dinner if found. Room strip search weekly for who knows what. Depression and ADHD ad was made up and needed to pray for healing and grace from God, because obviously it was a human earthly flaw for doing something bad. When at school I was not to join recess but study or go to the library, and someone has to sign a paper created by my parents to have initialed each day. I also had to do weekly grade report from teachers. No sleepovers away or at my home. My stepdad also had our phones tapped, but he knew about any and all conversations since he would ask me about it later. I'm convinced he had video, but never found proof. Once home from school I was to report to the neighbor, call parents, and then allowed in my home to start chores and homework. If I was late more than 5 minutes I would get belted, and school would be called to ask why. Punished if younger brother did something or made up stories. When I was able to drive, everything went downhill. I became my younger brother's chauffeur and my mileage was recorded. One hot day, summer going into senior year of HS, I invited some lady friends to swim. A hired neighbor to watch our house called my parents and told them that there were at least 2 boys in my home. That was a lie. One of my lady friends had a pixie haircut and the other swam with her oversized t-shirt on. All of a sudden this woman is walking into her home with a key in hand, and after her scaring the shit out of us, said she was worried I was alone with boys in the house and didn't think it was appropriate. We are all ladies. Now my parents are home and my stepdad has wasted no time in throwing my personal belongings out the front door. He had already assumed I had sex with said boy, the boy that was never there. That would have meant I lost my virginity. My mom starts screaming at me in front of everyone, my lady friends, my neighbors, because of the scene. There are lots of neighbors around now, and calling me worthless and no longer pure in her eyes, or the Lord, and how I was just trash and who would ever want me. I will never forget my mom saying that to me while beating me with anything in her reach: vases, frames, throwing dishes. I was 16 and left home. I had to quickly learn, picked up 2 jobs under the table, one at a shoe store at the mall and the other a tanning salon, and tried my best to finish HS without alarming anyone or allowing anyone to know what was going on. I didn't want to trouble anyone. My bosses soon learned that my living situations, wearing similar clothes repeatedly, and likely smelling funky, so after some time and trust they would allow me to sleep and bathe in their shoes and tanning building, so at least I was safe. Forever grateful for those people. Not sure what would have happened if not. Our entire family didn't know of my stepdad's multi-decade meth addiction until just recently, and probably makes sense now of all this mentioned above. I tried many times to resolve things, and it was always my trying. So once my first child was born, and stepdad relapsed, we permanently cut ties. She will be 5 this September. While cutting off the only family dynamic, no matter how distorted or dysfunctional it may have been, was the hardest thing I have ever had to do, but it has been the most rewarding and satisfaction I have ever felt. Words never hurt my parents, but my silence has made its biggest statement of my boundaries. I still am finding my way to healing from all the chaos abuse, and cry often because I miss my mom and brother. I only ever wanted to protect them, and yet the demon wins. No, I focus hard on being the present mother I only ever wished, prayed and hoped for, even still, for my own children. I never imagined this is how my life would turn out, but if it meant getting to where I am today, I'm thankful for who I am today and who I can be to my own husband, daughter, son and friends. Thanks for this safe place, and sorry for typos and errors. Girl here. My parents weren't, like, psychotic strict, but considering my and my older sister's fears and how I wasn't even allowed to attend slumber parties until I was well into junior high school, they were a bit more stringent than most. Probably their biggest pet peeve though, was me or Big Sis asking them, if they got a spontaneous phone call, who is it? For whatever reason, This made my dad just unbelievably angry. Even if it was just a family friend or someone, if we asked him who it was, he'd say something along the lines of, "Mind your own FG business." Dad had a few more main peeves, as he was a fairly sensitive dude but with a really short fuse. This was just one of the main stupidest rules that I could think of. He wasn't a bad dad, I guess that was just one of his triggers. Even now as an adult, I visibly cringe if a work associate or cousin asks him that and brace myself for the response. The most unreasonable thing about rules in my house was that they became a rule suddenly without me knowing it was the wrong thing to do. Examples: 1. Being grounded for 3 weeks for hand washing the dishes and letting them air dry, thus leaving spots on the glass cups. 2. Not being allowed to go see friends after I'd completed all of my chores because my mom always thought of 5 more time-consuming chores like picking up all the pinnacones and needles in the yard. We had 5 evergreen trees in the front yard for me to complete that weren't previously specified. I could go on, but it just makes me angry. I ended up sneaking out of the house frequently my senior year of high school because I was always grounded for miscellaneous bullshit. They didn't do it to me, but my grandparents talked about how when their kids were kids, if they didn't clean their rooms properly or had clothes hanging out of drawers, they would have what they called GI parties, where they would go into the kids' rooms and dump everything out of every dryer onto the floor and on their beds, so they would have to clean it all up. I was raised by my grandparents and got threats of GI parties but never actually had it done to me. Another thing was that my younger cousin, who was also being raised by my grandparents, went through a phase where he didn't like to bathe, so my grandfather would fill the tub, pick him up and put him in the tub fully clothed. It was pretty funny to watch. When we were small, probably between 4 and 7, we would sometimes get hung up on hooks on the closet door by our underwear. I don't remember if it was a punishment, or they just thought it was funny. It didn't hurt, and was funny to watch them do to my cousins. They would just be stuck there wiggling around. My mom makes me and my siblings pray even though she never prays. It's messed up. She cooks and cleans but a lot of her day is spent backbiting about people on the phone with my auntie. Why the fuck should we be devout Muslims when you don't follow the 5 pillars and you commit sin on a daily basis? And when I point it out, I'm the one who needs to shut up. Total BS. The worst human beings are the ones who aren't self-aware. My mother is the worst human being I have ever met. She plays the victim so she can find a perpetrator. All my parents have taught me is how I shouldn't conduct myself. That's the only bright side to this. When I think back on it, there weren't really any unreasonable standing rules. More like every now and then my parents would explode on something minor to make up for the lack of parenting. I love my parents, but they don't seem to get the idea that not being around much fuck their kids up a bit. I was extremely shy and withdrawn, and my brother is a narcissist. It would take quite a few paragraphs to explain, but suffice to say their lack of checks and balances on him, and my family's doting on him legitimized his belief that everything revolves around him. On the other hand, nobody paid attention to me, which is partially on me. I'm quite happy to fade into the background in any situation. I hate attention. Maybe cause I didn't get any when I was young and when I did it felt weird. I don't really know. But yet, I specifically remember the few times where my dad was shouting in anger at me, and neither made any sense. Once, he told us, during the middle of summer, when we were about 13 and 15, not to go outside while he was out. Mind you, we were 13 and 15, and literally every single day during the summer, no one was home, and we were outside unsupervised all fucking day. So my brother was like, rules don't apply to me, and goes outside. Dad came home, starts screaming at him, then starts getting pissed at me and whacks me for not stopping him. At the time, dude was like twice my size, and no one could tell him shit. So, another time, on my birthday, all I wanted was a remote-controlled car. So I got one. Brother proceeds to take it out while I'm not there. Dumbass tries to control it and ride a bike at the same time, runs it over and breaks it. Puts it back, doesn't tell anyone. I find it, get pissed, Dad of course thinks I'm lying to cover my own ass, and I get whacked a bit. Brother thought it was funny. Instead of parenting, Dad went the easy route, assigned blame and punishment, went back to doing whatever the hell it was he was doing. Fast forward 20 plus years, Brother is rapidly heading for a divorce that he just can't believe is his fault. Haven't said a word to him in maybe 3 years. Honestly lost track. I can't talk to him because he'll blame random bad shit that happened to him on something I or my best friend did like 25 years ago. Dad is disabled, lays around all day, can't understand why no one comes to visit. Mom, love her to death, but she's an idiot, makes excuses for both of them. I used to idolize my father and I glossed over a lot. Been thinking a lot about him lately and coming to terms with the fact that he's an asshole, much like my brother. Which sucks, but the truth is the best policy. The LDR, the lack of consistent rules was, for me anyway, worse than a strict environment. I know what you mean. I love my parents so much, but the fact that they just decide rules based on how they're feeling that day bothers me a lot. I also have anxiety issues, and the fact that we've never had any sort of routine or structure puts me on edge and probably contributed quite a bit to my anxiety getting worse over the years. I've called them out on it a lot and tried to explain how much trouble it causes for me, but they treat it like a joke every time and it sucks. Okay, this will definitely get better considering I'm a few hours late, so there's probably no point in using a throwaway, but here's my story. Was diagnosed with severe depression and anxiety during high school. Got home from the doctor, and my mother told me that she couldn't love me anymore and that I didn't have a right to feel like that. Would get screamed at almost every day about how ungrateful I was and to snap out of this fucking phase. She forced me to give her my passwords for Facebook, Skype and pretty much everything else, and would religiously log on every night to read through my private messages to see what I was talking about. Had to have all electronic devices confiscated after 9 p.m. This caused a number of late assignment submissions at school. I ended up burying my mental illness for a few years, didn't let my parents anywhere near what my feelings were doing. Fast forward, now in first year of university, started hearing voices and seeing things, thinking about dying on a more than daily basis. Turned 18, got myself to hospital and got prescriptions I've needed for years. I'm doing okay now. My parents are Jehovah's Witnesses. I grew up not being able to make friends. I wasn't allowed to shave my legs until I was 14. I wasn't allowed to have a phone until I was 18. I paid it when I finally was allowed to work, and when my family found out I was dating a worldly person, non-JW, and my now husband, they took my car, phone, and sent me away with strangers from the church so I couldn't talk to him for a few days. I finally had my husband pick me up when they let me come home, and I packed all I could for in his car and I moved in with him. It's been almost 5 years. I'm married to him. I have a house with him. And they still will not talk to me. Well, both my parents were extremely abusive till I was a teen. As a young child, no Power Rangers, Simpsons, Ren and Stimpy, nothing secular come to think of it. Unless I was at my grandmother's, the only thing I was allowed to watch was TBN. Then came my teen years, which brought on new tastes in music, Eminem, anything violent, haha. My mom broke hundreds of CDs. I just kept going to my friends and burning new copies. I wasn't allowed to have a GF, wasn't allowed to have company. At 11 my dad asked what I wanted. I said a weight bench. By 13 I was tired of being beaten, so I decided to fight back. Weight bench helped. My dad got rid of my bench. He hit me once more when I was 16. He thought I was gonna kill him. I could go on and on, but suffice to say my kids have plenty of freedom. And thanks to my family, I'm not religious at all. I was literally never allowed to go and hang out with other people until they had met them, and both their parents and I had to give them their address and home phone, and at least one of the parents' personal numbers. If we ended up going anywhere, they had to know and be notified immediately and home at the time they specified, otherwise I wouldn't be allowed to hang out with them again. Basically micromanaged and short-leashed every aspect of whatever social life I tried to have, among many other shitty parenting skills. Got emancipated as soon as I figured out what that was, lol. This one was the most ridiculous. I wasn't allowed to leave the coffee pot out. My mother had a really nice espresso machine that I could never master the art of using, so we had an ancient Mr. Coffee machine that I would use. My mother would get super irritated if I left the machine on the counter after I was done using it. My best friends can remember plenty of times my mother would do that whisper yell. Trick Labill 87, what is that coffee pot doing out? Once she was actually so pissed about the coffee pot being left out she grounded me for a week. The kicker to the whole thing was once I moved out, I came home to visit and there was my mom's nice espresso machine and a brand new Mr. Coffee on the kitchen counter. I turned to my mother, what is that doing on the counter? My mom, oh, your dad bought a new Mr. Coffee and it's not nearly as ugly the old one. Her whole reason for getting pissed off 4 years was because the old one was ugly. I would get grounded for a week if I was late. Once by no fault of my own I was 5 minutes late. My friend's mom tried to explain that she left and was late getting back, not to ground me, but I got grounded and she got yelled at by my stepdad for telling him how to raise his kid. I was so mad. I was allowed 3 15-minute phone calls a day, or I could have one 45-minute call. If I went over the time, he would pick up the other line and do a countdown until I hung up. Later they stopped paying the bill, so I had no phone time. My stepmom would never let me have a birthday party. When I turned 12, she finally let me have a sleepover with friends. I was going to a Catholic elementary school at the time that had a rule that if all of the class wasn't invited to a birthday party, then invitations could not be handed out at school to avoid hurting feelings. Mom wouldn't let me hang out with friends outside of school but also wouldn't let me invite the whole class. So I had to sneakily hand out invites at school to the few people I was allowed to invite, since that was the only time I ever saw them. The day of the party, my stepmom got a call from the school about what I had done, and just as everyone's arriving and going inside, she grabs my arm and yanks me aside to question me about what I'd done. I burst into tears trying to explain that I didn't know what else to do. She said I was grounded for 3 months and I needed to suck it up and not let on to my guests that I was grounded. We also had assigned seats at the dinner table when we had family dinners in front of the TV. My dad rarely ate with us. Her and her 2 kids got seats facing the TV. I got one that if I craned my neck I could see it, and my 2 siblings, when she let them eat, had to face the wall. When my oldest sister moved out, if one of my stepmom's 2 kids had a friend over or if my dad graced us with his presence, I had to face the wall. In junior high and high school, I wasn't allowed to do any extracurricular activities if it meant she had to drive me to and from events unless I joined one of her kids in something, like choir. She would take her son to and from basketball practices and games all over the country, and her daughter did soccer all over the state. But if I asked to do an after-school club I had to find my own way home. I actually rebelled against her my sophomore year of high school and tried out for a select choir that did a lot of events outside of school. When I got in, I had planned to turn it down because I knew how pissed she would be about it. My dad decided to leave her that month, though, so I was able to enroll in the class anyway. Turned out to be one of the most fun classes I'd ever taken. My school kept the accelerated reader program, taking tests on books you read online 4 points, all the way through from grade school through high school. Each quarter, you had to get 60 points, usually 4-6 books, so like 8-12 books per semester. It was a way to try to force kids to read. Anyway, I hated reading and would always get 20% of my grade taken off because I always had 0 points. When I started high school, that trend ended. Mom enforced a rule that I would be grounded at the beginning of each quarter, and could only gain my freedom to leave the house after I had reached the 60-point goal for the quarter. Most kids hit this goal around the last 2 weeks of the semester. For me, it rarely happened ever because it was in high school that I discovered my hate for reading developed a terribly slow reading ability. The result, I never partied, I never went to friends' birthday parties, I never developed much of a social life outside of the school halls and track practice. I was free a sum total of 19 weeks during my high school career. The ultimate irony, I am now in the throes of law school, where all I do is read. Lo and behold, I love it. Thanks, Mom. I was not allowed to frown or be angry or sad or have a serious face. My dad would get mad and said if I didn't fix my face he'd give me something to be sad about. I wasn't allowed to have any emotion but being happy. If I was not smiling all the time it would be the end of the world. Also, I was not allowed to leave my house. If I wanted to go outside, I was only allowed on the porch. If I wanted to go any further, my brother had to come with me or my dad had to be there to watch me. We can only play our Super Nintendo 1 hour a week. Me and my brother combine our hours and play co-ops for 2 hours. This continued well into our PlayStation days. Main reason I disincentived myself from playing stuff like Suikoden and Breath of Fire 3. That's not the end of it though. Before we can use our hour we should have finished all assignments, took a shower and take an afternoon nap. Because of this 5 p.m. Saturday is very exciting for kid me. At my 5th birthday party, I had to go last at all the games because the guests go first. We lined up for the first game and all my friends made way for the birthday girl, which I was really excited about. My mom swooped in and scolded me for being so rude. All my friends were asking me why I wasn't going first and didn't understand what my parents were doing. Also, my mom would make me go visit distant relatives when we see my grandparents. I'd be 6 or 7 and was expected to sit 4 hours while they visited with nothing to do, nothing to read, literally bored to tears. I'm 44 and I still get upset thinking about those torturous visits. I wasn't allowed to wear my hat sideways. By the time I was 10 or 12 that was the thing kids my age did, but not me. My mom told me she would shoot me if she caught me wearing my hat sideways again, to which I asked her if she was joking because I figured she had to be, but nope. She told me she was dead flat serious. She was apparently worried that would lead to me being adopted into a street gang at 10 or 12 when we lived in a small town where the only street gang was a bunch of 8th, 10th grade girls who called themselves Juggalas. Thanks to my foster mom I wasn't allowed to have sleepovers, drink anything except water, listen to anything except pop gospel music, rock music apparently equals marijuana, have any money whatsoever except from odd jobs, which I was almost never allowed to do anyways, have new stuff that was exclusively for my foster siblings, I got their shit hand-me-downs, do anything else that went against the Mormon cult. On my birthday I felt like such a god because they were obligated to buy me Linkin Park merchandise because that's what I wanted. She also had this retarded token system where I had to earn tokens by behaving, which in her eyes was being a perfect robot, no complaints whatsoever, and obeying every single one of her foster care rules, which are actually the ones she made. Foster dad was cool and bought me a Fanta a few times. It was definitely the degree to which content was restricted. My parents wanted to keep me away from anything with any liberal or irreligious ideas. Our TV had passcodes, I couldn't go see movies, I was never on the internet alone. They would turn off anything on television that had ideas they didn't like, I couldn't read most classic books, I couldn't listen to the radio aside from a Christian music station, and even that was dubious because of its rock music. Stuff like Pokémon and Star Wars were banned, and the list goes on. I was homeschooled, too, with a stay-at-home mom and a minister dad who was usually home. Dodging the restrictions was hard, but they also had to travel on a lot of weekends, so I figured out the passcodes for the TV and would bike to the library to read stuff they didn't want me to. Libraries also have internet, so not allowed to hang out with boys once I started 6th grade. My parents are afraid I'll talk to one and immediately marry him and have not fully Indian children. It's fucking ridiculous. I had so many restrictions in high school, so whenever I wanted to do something with friends I would always just lie and make up girl names and say I was going with them. To my parents' credit, they would ask a ton of questions before and then none after they sufficiently believed my story, that is, they almost never asked for proof of what I was doing or who I was with. Although now that I've graduated university and occasionally come home to visit, they're even stricter about it and I'm not allowed to go out more than like twice a week or they'll freak. which is even more ridiculous because I'm legally allowed to drink, but not have male friends. Plus they plan on marrying me off to some proper Indian man in a few years. Joke's on them, though, little do they know I have an amazing boyfriend who I completely intend to marry one day. No arranged marriage for me, suckers. I was not allowed to watch networks like MTV, Teen Nick, Cartoon Network, nor was I allowed to listen to music. Black Eyed Peas, Britney Spears, Bieber, Neo, any pop, rap, or R&B song at all. She never played the radio. We listened to the same old Spanish opera CD every time we hit the car. Basically, anything designed for kids and teens I wasn't allowed to expose myself to. She thought it would corrupt me and make me a disrespectful brat with absolutely no future or anything. Fortunately, I went out with friends, so I didn't completely miss out on it. That reminds me, I had to lie about a sleepover once to go to a Kanye West concert. Man, my mom was a Philistine.